This conference will now be recorded.
Call to order meeting of the Township of Hamilton Committee, Monday, September 21st, 2020. Please stand for the flag. Charlie, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America. It stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law by posting a notice of this meeting on the bulletin board in the municipal building and by publishing in Atlantic City and the Atlantic County Record on January the 15th, 2020. Mr. Kane,
Here.
Mr. Gishard,
Present.
Mr. Kurtz,
Here.
Mr. Vitale,
Here.
Mayor Schenker.
Here. We have a moment of silence for private reflection. We have no guest presentations. We have no additions or deletions. Early public comment on agenda items, excluding items listed for public hearing. Anyone in the public like to speak?
Mr. Mayor, there is
Move the closed public portion.
The motion is second to close the public portion, or any questions? Any questions, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
The ayes have it. 3, discussion, formal actions may be taken. A, regulation of short-term rentals. Mark, you want to give a full background on this, please?
Certainly. This is regarding, we've seen the development or the evolving of short-term rentals in communities across the country over the last few years. And this is where private residents will rent a room, or they'll rent part of their house overnight or for a few days. But it has evolved into a situation where people are renting whole homes for a few days, a couple days. And I think this is reflected in some of the house parties that we've seen coming out of the Jersey Shore and the spread of the COVID virus because of these parties are unregulated. I know that Council Committeeman Kane had received a complaint regarding his neighborhood. And when we started doing some research and started taking a look at the environment, it was kind of a frightening situation in the fact that the home is being rented with the capacity of 16 people to come in for a weekend and have some form of parties or events. The fear, the one of the factors that the chief and I looked at was the fact that the people can rent their home vacated, and if something occurs, we have no contact information and we have no information on how to reach these people. Hey, what happens if the house catches fire? What happens if there's some type of physical problem at the property? And I think in discussions just brought forth by Mr. Kane was, the impact on the neighborhood is substantial. In that, we all try to live in quiet, nice neighborhoods, and all of a sudden, if you have one house that becomes the party house every weekend, I think it impacts everybody across the board in the community. I will tell you that when I was in Galloway, we actually wrote, we called it the Animal House Ordinance because of the problem with the college there. And the problem with people renting houses. But this is a little bit different in the sense that this is short-term people in and out. And I think the committee needs to have a discussion on, and along with the police chief here, on how we look at some form of regulation or controls to minimize the impact on the community.
Yeah, I certainly agree, Mr. Mayor. I mean, this one particular house is listed as being able to sleep 16. in a residential neighborhood. 2 weekends in a row, there were in excess of 6 to 9 cars parked in the driveway, in the yard, along the street, and we're talking about a residential neighborhood. And what concerns me the most is they're coming in for a weekend, again, in a residential neighborhood, and we don't know who's coming in. And that concerns me, especially in neighborhoods where there's small children. I just think that we need to address, first of all, rentals as a whole. In residential neighborhoods, if an individual wants to rent their house out for a year to someone or buy an investment property, that's perfectly fine. And I want to make it clear that that's not what we're looking to address here, but being able to rent it out repeatedly just for weekends or a couple days stays, I think has the potential to ruin characters of neighborhoods very, very quickly. I think that we should all, and as Arch mentioned, we should know and have a registration process of even long-term rentals of who the landlord is, so that in the event of an emergency or in the event of multiple violations at the property, we should know who to contact and who to call.
Yeah, Charlie, I think that's a good point. We've had situations right here in the township where a owner of a property will rent the property out, and then the tenant of that property will rent out a room or more than a room without the knowledge of the landlord or the owner. And that's happened here several times, and that's an issue too that would have to be talked about or worked into a discussion.
I certainly agree, Committeeman Kurtz.
Who's going to be responsible for upholding this rule of law?
Thank you. They made it 7 days in those areas. So if you have a specific area that is amenable to that, you can do it. That was challenged. The challenge came from an individual or a company that had a number of these types of homes. And the ordinance was upheld by the court. The challenge was that what you as a governing body would be doing in enacting an ordinance of this sort is really amending your zoning ordinance, which you don't have the authority to do without the planning board. The court did not address that specific issue. The court did uphold the ordinance. I'm also aware that in Jersey City, it has been a very, very big problem. So these kinds of things are happening throughout the state. We would be in a group of other towns that are doing the same thing. Not that they're being challenged at this point, but they could be. But I can tell you that I spoke to the solicitor, another solicitor, actually the solicitor in Egg Harbor Township, and he explained to me why they did it and what they did. Their concern came about with respect to a notice they got that a group of people that happened to have been involved with a motorcycle gang were planning a party, and they put it on Facebook. And that's how it became public knowledge. So they're the kinds of things that you got to be looking at. So at least at the trial level, Judge Porto has upheld the Egg Harbor Township ordinance. So if you put reasonable restrictions on it, these kinds of things can work. And you may want to mirror Egg Harbor's. You may want to change it a little bit. You may find portions of the township where it could be less. I don't know. Because we don't have those outlook places like Longport Seaview and, you know, the places on the pike that
West Atlantic City area,
Atlantic
that's something.
City, yeah. But for now, at least here, it has been upheld. But the appeal period for that decision has not lapsed yet. So what I would suggest to you is that we wait at least to the next meeting, and the 45-day appeal period will have lapsed. And if you're of a mind to do something like it, you would do it at that point, and I can draft it for you.
Well, just explain to me again, why would we have to go to the planning board?
There is case law, for example, that says that you as a governing body cannot issue a use variance because that jurisdiction vests with the zoning board. There's also a body of law that says that when you want to amend your zoning ordinance, one of the processes that you have to follow is a recommendation from the planning board. So if it was declared to be a zoning issue, which it was not in Egg Harbor's case, you would have to go through that procedure. I'm not saying that you couldn't or you shouldn't.
Why don't we do it as a licensing issue, Bob?
We lost that battle.
Well, we can fight it again. I mean, there's many towns that have as licensing issues that license short-term rentals and license maybe just rewriting our one that we had a problem with. But I think especially from a public safety standpoint and a caretaking position is that especially with short terms, you know, we've got to have some form of knowledge about who do we contact, who do we notify. And from an enforcement standpoint, the enforcement standpoint can also be done by codes and the police department. Let's face the fact that if a homeowner rents his apartment out or rents his house out and fails to license it or fails to notice us, then our codes people can issue a violation under the code for that failure to license and do it that way.
I'd be happy to look at it.
And I have to be honest, I'm also in favor. You said the policing and the monitoring of it would be the neighbors themselves. But I noticed in reading up on what some other communities are doing, if we are, I mean, I would hope that we would adopt some type of ordinance to combat this. If you list your property after the ordinance is passed, you should be fined. If you're found on a site listing your property for use that is not lawful, then that in itself should enact enforcement action. Because why would you be, because that's part of the problem. I went on, Egg Harbor Township has a great ordinance. But I spent time over the weekend, and there's homes in Egg Harbor Township, not in the designated areas, that are listed on certain sites. So that in itself should be an issue. I mean, if people are getting around it, because we can't expect our zoning office, obviously, to be going out and checking, you know, driving up and down the street to see if it's happening. But, you know, if we get somebody reports that it's listed on a site, that in itself should enact some type of enforcement.
Well, I have two responses, one to you and one to Arch. The neighborhood folks is how you really get notice. They're the ones that call up and say, hey, and that alerts the police or the zoning. With respect to what Arch is saying in terms of licensing, it makes a lot of sense because ultimately you want to make the owner of the property responsible because the folks that rent it are going to be gone. So you need to know who that is, and you need to have a process that says, here's what's going to happen if you violate it. We lost that in the appellate division 3 years ago. But our attempt was this.
Yes,
And what's happening here is this.
that's exactly it.
Correct.
And I think that we could craft something that would achieve what you're asking by making the owner of the property responsible for any violations, because that's the ultimate.
I mean, because John made a good point, and we know it's happening. Even with that, the landlord may not be aware of what's going on his property. A lot of them are absentee. So they may not be aware that the tenant is now leasing out space inside the house.
I can tell you in Cape May County, it's going to become a huge problem. In offshore communities, for folks that can't afford to pay in Wildwood Crest or Ocean City, for a weekly rental. And statewide, you're going to see a lot of this. So I agree with what you're saying. I think that Arch makes a good point that we could craft something, but I think you do it in steps. And the first step would be to, in some respects, mirror or model an ordinance after Egg Harbor Township.
I agree.
Second respect, licensing, not registration, but licensing.
So the police just say the police get called to a residence, and they obviously they're going to be taking names of people that are there, and they're found out not to be on a lease. That can be enforceable back to the landlord.
Depends on the circumstances.
Of course, right.
But if the second step of your ordinance that deals with enforcement and licensing deals with requiring records of who's there and how long they're there, that's your arrow. That's your quiver. I mean, that's where you go with it.
Well, I'm certainly in favor of doing this much sooner than later.
Well, I can mirror EHT's ordinance in some respects and have it to you for the next meeting.
And I don't know what the opinion of the governing body is, but I don't see, I understand what they were trying to accomplish in their ordinance with Seaview Harbor and the other outlying areas. I don't see that in Hamilton Township. I don't see, with us being such a rural community, I don't see where that would be necessary to carve out any areas.
Well, you don't have the proximity to the shore
Exactly.
that they do.
I was talking with committeemen in Summers Point and planning officials in Summers Point. They're going through a similar issue because they're the gateway to the shore.
Yep.
So it's a little tougher for them to regulate it because they call themselves the gateway to the shore. So we're not the gateway to the shore. So I'd like to see, again, something sooner than later. So
I'll be glad to put something together. The opinion was September 13th, I think, 5 days. So it would be it would be after our first meeting in October.
The reason why we can't keep working on it and then wait and see what happens with that.
You could introduce it to the next meeting, the first step.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple more issues that we may want to get involved.
absolutely. I mean, I welcome input from the public, welcome input, obviously, from our professionals, and but I just think it's something that we absolutely need to address in timely manner as possible. So
We want them to go forward with drafting the ordinance.
yeah, do we need a motion on that, or do we? No. I'm in favor
I
of
just need Arch to tell me to do it.
We'll work with it. We'll have a working group between the police department, Bob, and myself, and codes. Make sure that we craft something that works for us.
Keith, have you seen if these types of residents have a problem? Yep. Okay. Two, move on. We have no public hearings. We have no introduction of ordinances. Move to number 6, bids, contracts, and change orders. A, resolution to award contract to Edmunds Gov Tech for cloud hosting fee software in the amount of $6,000. Utility billing and collection services software in the amount of $18,505.10. Collection software existing voice.
this is for actually for the trash. So we can set up the second collection. We in the process of getting into the trash business a little bit, we had found that Waste Management had substantially underestimated the amount of second cans within the community. So what we need to do is we need to have the ability to bill for the second trash can, collect for the second trash can, monitor the second trash can, obviously keeping the serial numbers correct. And then this interfaces directly with our Edmunds financial software, so we don't have redundancies built in.
So out of this, 5,900 of it would be an annual fee to
Right.
continue. I'll move 6A.
Second,
I'll second it.
any questions? Hearing no questions, Rita, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Kane?
Yes.
Mr. Gishard?
Yes.
Mr. Kurtz?
Yes.
Mr. Vitale?
Yes.
Mayor Shanker?
Yes.
All yes and carried.
B, resolution authorizing acceptance of proposal for post-construction pavement test core services, Cotillion Boulevard Pavement Preservation, Phase 1. Project Mazer Consulting, the amount of $1,325, and authorizing mayor to sign same.
Mr. Mayor, this is a case where Dixon does the original project. Then they have to have an independent engineer do the borings and confirm that the specifications were met. And this is for the testing by Mazer to do that.
Are there any questions?
Motion move 6B.
Second.
A motion and a second. Rita, can we get a roll call vote for this, please?
Mr. Kane?
Yes.
Mr. Gishard?
Yes.
Mr. Kurtz?
Yes.
Mr. Vitale?
Yes.
Mayor Shanker?
Yes.
All yes and carried.
Consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move the consent agenda 7A through F.
I'll second it.
Motion and second to move consent agenda A through F. Are there any questions? Hearing no questions, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, the ayes have it. Personnel. A, resolution appointing Kristen Schneider as part-time communications officer for the police department, $16.56 per hour, contingent upon successful completion of background process. Start date to be determined.
So moved.
Motion is second. Are there any questions? Hearing no questions, we can get a roll call vote on this one.
Mr. Kane?
Yes.
Mr. Gishard?
Yes.
Mr. Kurtz?
Yes.
Mr. Vitale?
Yes.
Mayor Shanker?
Yes.
All yes and carried.
9, approval. A, minutes of September 8th, 2020, regular meeting.
Second.
Motion is second. Are there any questions?
I just think Rita got them out in record time.
Hearing no real questions. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, the ayes have it. B, bills, list total of $1,952,763.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Are there any questions? Hearing no questions, Rita, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Kane?
Yes.
Mr. Gishard?
Yes.
Mr. Kurtz?
Yes.
Vitale?
Yes.
Mayor Shanker?
Yes.
All yes and carried.
Reports, Mr. Administrator.
I would like to talk trash. That is right, you want to just reel it up so the community can see the new cans. These new cans of, if you haven't gone by Public Works, about 8,000 cans have been dropped there. These are the new and improved cans that will be the pickup process. As you can see, I think that they're pretty solid, and I'm really kind of proud of Public Works and what they've done over the last couple months in this transition. October 1 is the actual date that we will be transitioning over. We will be recording, obviously, all the cans. We have some secondary smaller ones that will be able to provide seniors and people who don't need the bigger can. And we obviously will continue recycling. But I think what you're seeing here is a new and improved, along with the bulk trash pickup that'll be done on a regular basis. And I think it's just one of those things that improves the community overall and brings us up to the level where we should be.
I just raise it by you saying that. So if somebody wanted a smaller can, could they trade that in for the smaller can and not be charged?
Yes.
What is improved about it?
I'm sorry.
What is improved? You mentioned it's got improvements. What are
Well, first of all, it's labeled much better, reflecting the fact on the top that, we're not taking a dredge yard waste or taking that kind of ash. I think we're gonna come back. And stuff electronics and stuff, so it's pretty, I think it's a little bit of a heavier can. And the way it's designed on the inside, it does give you more space in the older design, with the wheels mount at the side. And I think it's a heavier view. Got our seal on the side, reflected, and the best part is that they disappear. And you're driving down the street, Hamilton, you can see one call something, and we'll get it back.
And I'm happy to see the color.
Yeah, well, we made sure that the color was obviously different than the blue.
Right.
Obviously, the public works, so it sticks out a little bit. It's not, it's not ugly in color. It's
It's not white.
not white
It's
and
not
yellow
color.
with a blue pop or something like that. It's just a pretty standard face into the background. And I just think if for all the things we do in government, this is one of the things we put a lot of interest in, and I think the public works doing a job and everything.
So just so it's clear to everybody that these cans are gonna start showing up in front of your house. Use them after the 1st of October. And that same week, you wanna take your green can, put it out to the street. Waste management will come by and pick all that up. If you have any questions, feel free to call Public Works Town Hall. Help you out with the transition.
So you can't keep both cans.
You don't own. Waste management. We own.
No, we own these, yes.
They took care of it. All right, very good. Anybody else have any questions? Mr. Solicitor. Nothing to report. Okay, Mr. Engineer.
Mayor and committee, thank you. I have a report dated September 21st. First item is the Lake Lenape Dam Committee met last Monday, September 14th. Couple things occurred at that meeting. We had a representative from Jeff Van Drew's office, which was a pleasant surprise that I didn't know they were going to be on the line, and that was Adam Anatucci. He brought information to the meeting regarding 2 possible grant applications for the Lake Lenape Dam. The first one, he didn't, wasn't as keen on because it starts in May of 2021, and they only offer about $10 million statewide. But the second one, he seemed very, very interested and positive, and that was it's called the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities Grant. It's a FEMA-backed grant. There's $500 million available for state of New Jersey, and that application begins September 30th of this year through January 29th. And I think the county is going to take the lead, but the reason we're having these monthly meetings, as Carl had wanted, is just to keep things moving and keep an eye on everybody. So there's some potential here for a grant application and maybe an award there. The other things that were brought to us at that meeting, we've been asking the county and their engineer for the cost of repairs for the powerhouse that are needed. Arch has been asking me a number of times, and we just emphasized to the county at that meeting, we need to know what these costs are for the powerhouse repairs. And we're still waiting for the conceptual dam design. And those are the 2 critical paths for us right now. We need to know for budget reasons the repairs, and we want to see a conceptual design, because when we see conceptual design, that conceptual design will be submitted to Pinelands for review and State Historic Preservation Office for their review. So that's the critical path on the dam right now. The next meeting will be October 19th. We made a request that their design engineer, who we're paying 50% of his fees, WSP is a design engineer, we've asked that he be present at every monthly meeting online, and they were mildly okay with that, but I think they finally agreed to that. It's a little challenging for us when we ask questions of the county, and then they have to go back to their engineer. So we thought, let's have the engineer present at all these meetings, that we can get sort of an answer rather than wait.
How was the powerhouse used?
Brett could probably answer that better than myself. I have not been in the powerhouse.
How is it used or how was it used?
It's not,
You gotta come up.
Look.
There's one in the back.
Correct me if I'm wrong. The dam itself has 3 floodgates, which can be opened and closed some of the time. But in the powerhouse, there's also a floodgate that can be used to relieve those 3 outlets of water, and when open, can assist in lowering the lake or help lower the lake. And Brett's forces have used that on occasion to assist when we had one, like the number 2 gate would get stuck once in a while. So inside the powerhouse is a gate that will open up and down and help relieve overflooding in the dam.
It's primarily a backup then. It's not necessary.
It's a necessary backup. I think, having dealt with the dam committee for a lot of years. And I think, Brett, you rely on that. don't you?
Thank you.
An issue that Mr. Talley brought up was trying to keep them on some form of time frames by utilizing some spreadsheets and so forth. And one of the concerns that in monitoring this meeting that was raised was the fact that because of the COVID situation, their deadlines are kind of open. And I think we're going to have some delays in trying to get things approved because DEP is just not meeting deadlines. And it didn't, in talking to John Peterson, it doesn't seem like anybody is really pushing to meet deadlines at this point. And that was a major concern.
That was the case, and then changed that over the past year. Really pushed it. Now, like you said, our governor is basically throughout all deadlines with pretty much every department, because of the COVID. That is going to create, it's a worry that I have.
Mhm.
But at the same time, like I said to them in the many meetings that we've had, that, you submit a permit for approval. After 2 weeks, I expect somebody to pick up the phone and say, hey, it flat out happened. One of the reports was just sitting on somebody's desk, and then they retired, and it was literally months before it got picked up again. You can't let that happen again. But that's going to be an issue.
Anything else, Steve?
a few more things. Cotton Mill Bridge, I just want to report they're still on schedule. I stopped there Friday morning for a few minutes. They were demoing the North Bridge abutment. The South Bridge abutment was ready for they're going to put some stone down, and they said they could be driving piles as early as today. I don't know if they started today, but the South abutment was ready for piling. No issues out there. There's not a lot of construction crews working out there. They have a schedule, and the project's running pretty smooth from what everybody I've spoken to involved. The road program 2019, I'm trying to get Arawak to finish up a couple of punch list items. That's the paving out at Morningside and McGeary, Monmouth, and Tanglewood here right down the street. Tavistock and Mays Landing, there was one thing left to do on that project. We finally had, Arawak had their subcontractor seal coated the community center parking lot on Saturday. They line striped it today. Next Monday, they're going to perform the seal coating on the original sections of Tavistock, and that will complete the project. The reason we did the seal coating in 2 phases, with the community center being seal coated this weekend, any of the residents that live in the original phases can park their cars in the community center parking lot, because once we seal coat, we need to have the residents stay off of those roads for 24 hours unless there's an emergency. The other items I have is Atlantic Avenue. Finally got a verbal okay from NJDOT, so I shall be putting that out to bid any day now. The only other thing I have to report is the sign, the bridge sign, bridge out sign at Main Street, Route 40 and 50 came down again. Arch brought it to my attention this afternoon. We had the contractor look at it. I looked at it tonight. I will make sure they put up a more permanent sign. It's come down, I think, 3 times now. We can't have that. We can't be chasing these signs on Main Street. So we'll stay with that in the morning and make sure they have a more permanent sign put up.
Or we will put one up.
Or we will put one up. I agree. Thank you.
Here from Township Committee, Carl.
The 9/11 ceremony was held. It went very, very well. As usual, it was a somber occasion. And I'd like to thank everybody that was involved, Public Works, Boy Scouts, all the fire companies, Bayes Landing, it went very well. Weather was great. And thanks to everybody, to that police department, everybody. You guys did a great job. And of course, Mr. Quill, love hearing his voice out there every year with his cadence and everything. It's a pleasure to hear Mr. Will. Night of Lights went very well. Every year it gets better. There was a lot of people there. It was, I would say, from about halfway down to Bulkhead all the way to Spoonies, there was 4 or 5 people deep. It's a work in progress. There was a little bit of a lull, and I think a lot of people left and missed out on some of the boats. But it was a very enjoyable night. Weather was fantastic. From what I hear, the houses were really lit up nice, and everything went off well. And hopefully next year it'll just keep getting bigger and bigger. And also heard, I haven't been down there yet, but Young Skating Rink is open again. And I hear that it was refurbished with some new carpeting. I think that carpeting's been there since we were kids. So that should be pretty neat. And but they're back open, and of course with only 25% of the people allowed in there, but get out and go roller skating again. That's it. Reagan, that
Carl, John, you have anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, I just had a couple of things I wanted to touch on. First, I wanted to say what a great job our Public Works Department did over at War Memorial Park with the amount of damage we had and trees down from the last storm. I other than a few trees short, I don't think I've ever seen the park and the grassy areas and everything look quite as nice as they do now. It really looks great over there, and I'm hoping we can get back to a situation where we can use it again to bring people together here in the center of town. And my other comment is on the trash cans. I'm just hoping that the public has the ability and the contact information in case a can does not show up at their location, and they have a trash day coming up and no can to put it in. So I'm a little concerned, and I've had some people ask me about what happens, how do you do this? So I'm hoping that we have a good plan where the public can go and get answers if something doesn't go the way it should. And that's really it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Charlie?
I just have a couple things. I want to just echo Carl's comments regarding the 9/11 ceremony. Traffic, Mr. Philippone, I was really concerned, as you know, prior to the bridge going out, that traffic, especially on 559, it was going to be a mess. But whatever signage we've done for traffic has certainly worked. Because I think even with the record season that they've had in Ocean City this past season, there was actually less traffic on 559 than what we're used to seeing. So whatever we did in the outlying areas, make sure that stays up because it worked very well. Second thing is, I was very saddened to hear that Unity Lodge number 96 in town, where I was raised 35 years ago plus, as all civic organizations are struggling, have been struggling for years to get membership. But between COVID and the bridge, they made the decision to after down, and that building is now up for sale. It's shame it's an icon lodge. We're gonna miss her. I'm happy to report, Mr. Mayor, that the recommendations at of the last meeting for the development that are looking to possibly be done in town that was sent to the planning board. The planning board acted on Thursday night and unanimously voted to have Palestine and Associates do the investigation work, and we're hoping that will only take 3 weeks to a month, and we'll have that back to hopefully make that recommendation to Township Committee. I will tell you that there was a lot of discussion, and the planning board has also made a recommendation, would like to make a recommendation to Township Committee that we take it maybe one step forward and look at the property across from the Zabers property, where the old Cassia Plaza sat that burned down decades ago, through to Delilah Road, and maybe consider having those looked at and declared an area of redevelopment also. If we're going to do one side, it might make sense to do the other side. So I don't know what action has to be taken to authorize that, whether we have to authorize the planning board to look at it, if it's something we want to do or don't want to do. But I think it's something we should, if we're looking at the one side, we should possibly look at the other. Now that's it.
Only an observation I made coming down Route 40. It seems like the area is coming to life, like the more businesses opening up. And I haven't, I went to a restaurant in Margate, and it's amazing how busy it is. Parts of the area are coming to life. That's what I wanted to know.
Open this up to the public for public comment.
Move to close the public portion.
Second,
Second?
Second, close the public portion. Are there any questions? Hearing none, all those signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it. We will adjourn to executive session to discuss the 2020 tax court settlement between Hamilton Mall Realty versus Hamilton Township, attorney-client privilege.
So moved.
second,
Any second or any questions? No questions, all signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Just to note, we will not be reconvening. We will not be coming back. Be it resolved by the Township Committee of the Township of Hamilton that this meeting be adjourned to an executive session to discuss the following matters, which are exempt from public discussion pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law, 2020 Tax Court Settlement, Hamilton Mall Realty et al. Versus Hamilton Township, attorney-client privilege. Be it further resolved that the governing body will not reconvene in public session to confirm the results of the executive session. Be it further resolved that the results of said executive session shall be made known as soon as the basis for confidentiality is no longer confidential. It's 7:15 PM.